Hi, it's Mark from Mark of the Cyberbeast, and today we're finally going to have the episode I told you guys about. This is going to be on steer by wire. Okay. Now, I wanted to make sure we had an episode on this because how this all started was a Facebook guru on steer by wire saying how dangerous it was to put this into a car. And as we all know, it really isn't. So I decided to bring a friend of mine, someone I know, respect. He's going to tell you a little bit about himself, but I think he's qualified enough to talk about steer by wire. But before I introduce him, I wanted to give you some visuals today. So I spent the last 4 days staying at my pier, so this is a lot of my hard work. Okay, behind me, we got a lot of boat traffic. We got the Blue Crab Festival in Little River this weekend, so be some good eye candy. But I've got Jason Blair here. Okay, and this is a guy who he's going to tell you exactly how it is with steer by wire. So first, Jason's give a little information about himself, and then we'll just talk shop about what this all is. So go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a pilot. I've been actually a pilot since I was 15 years old. Got lucky to start this when I was really young by just bugging the crap out of my dad. Nobody in my family flew. Don't know why I wanted to, but I looked up one day and thought this looked cool. And my dad was out on the boat with us, and one of his fellow teachers was saying his son was learning to fly, and I was like, "Wait, you can do that when you're in like high school? I want to do this, right?" So off we went, and I started flying, and have been doing it ever since. And became an instructor, and then got into somehow magically became an FA examiner. So I get to be a designated pilot examiner, and the best way to describe that is think driver's ed test guy for pilots, right? So I show up and see how they're doing after they've gotten their training, and we get to move them onto their certificates. Do a lot of aviation writing in the training realm, and get to have just generally a lot of fun. So I'm actually sitting here in Minneapolis today in kind of an off thing where I fly with a friend of mine. We're bringing his kids to soccer games in Minneapolis from Michigan. So what a first world problem, right? How'd you get to your soccer game as a 13-year-old? Well, dad flew me there. Pretty cool way to do it. So I got to hang out with them for the weekend as we're up here, and good to chat with you, Mark. Sometimes I want to fly down to you and actually see you instead of doing it on those commercial airliners. We should do it the fun way. And actually, I'm kind of thinking we might end up doing that here in December. Amy and I are planning a little trip to maybe be down your way. So if we get their way with an airplane, we'll make sure we stop on by and say hi too. Now, our airplane that we're going to fly does not have, and I'm going to call it fly by wire, right? That's what we call it in the aviation land.
Mhm.
It's basically electrical wires, right? We've been doing this for years and years and years in aviation, and it's one of the safest darn things out there because the older systems, we look at a lot of the older airplanes and certainly some of the smaller airplanes, it was all mechanical linkages, right? We had cables and pulleys, a lot of hydraulic systems, things like that, that moved flight controls, moved fuel controllers, all this kind of stuff. And we've modernized and upgraded for a lot of reasons to get to fly by wire, especially in our bigger airplanes and a lot of our military aircraft. If we really look back, I think it was the F-16 was probably one of the first ones that became the fly by wire airplane. And then Airbus really has done a lot of that. Their A320 series was revolutionary in that. And as we've gone forward, pretty much everything that comes out nowadays is digital control surfaces in modern, larger, bigger and military aircraft that are out there.
It's interesting because these planes are flying hundreds, thousands of miles an hour, military ones, and these people on Facebook, everyone's a guru, right? They read something about Tesla, and in 5 minutes they're an expert on steering. But the most obvious thing for me is the last thing I want is this big metal stick pointing right at my chest that it just, you get to an accident and that thing's going right through you, airbag or not. That thing is a brick wall. But with the steer by wire, with the yokes that we have in the Cybertruck, break away. You've got the airbags, but you don't have that big metal, you know, rack and pinion steering or whatever they've got. It's all mechanical thing. And there was this, oh, well, Tesla did. Other manufacturers have done it, but they stopped doing it. So,
Well, there's a lot of manufacturers still, we talk aviation land still doing old systems too, but there's a lot of them doing the new ones. And we get to put really cool stuff into these systems as a result. We look at one of the most common aviation, general aviation modern aircraft is the Cirrus. And the new airplanes that they have, because we have digital controls in these two, there's an assist, we can have force feedback in it. So we look at our airplanes, go all the way to the brand new big jets that we're flying on airliners. If we're going to pull back too far and the plane's going to get stalled, right? If the pilot's going to pitch up too high, get that angle of attack, we have what's called a stick shaker in there. We have assisting tools that help push those controls. You see this in most of your modern vehicles with lane assist, right? It's helping guide you back to where you want to be. And especially we think about the fly-by-wire stuff, we can have motors in these systems that add more or less force into it. If it looks like, hey, we're going to drive off the road into the ditch, we might get a little force feedback pushing us back. So if you're trying to push that way, there's a little bit of feedback to you that maybe is a barrier to stop you from doing it. If you're going to veer into another lane, it can help you with that. Now, also, if you have to make a really hard turn, you're not having to crank that wheel. I think, we're old enough, Mark, to remember vehicles that didn't even have power steering, right?
Oh yeah,
We think
you
about
got
like
a
trying to
workout turning
hard.
that wheel, man.
Yeah, you're cranking that wheel. You think about a hard turn. Power steering wasn't real great or didn't have it. You're trying to make a turn in a ditch. You're cranking on this thing, right? You got systems that are going to let you do this when you have the fly-by-wire technology. You're basically leveraging digital signals to let motors do the work for you. And in these cases, I'm assuming the Cybertruck has motors on each wheel, right?
What's
Okay,
funny is
so
we had
one goes, we got others.
yeah, we had an update that was supposed to adjust some of the steer by wire, and it definitely made it a little bit different. Gave it more of an, I think it was more of a natural feel. Gave it more of the old time steering. And some people were like, "I don't like it. I like the new." But what's funny is I sold my boat when we bought our place in the Keys, but my boat had steer by wire.
Yeah,
And that's it's a 30,
right.
right? And I took that out to the Gulf Stream. I took it 60 miles offshore, and I didn't worry about not having steering on the way in, right? If something
I
breaks.
actually worry more about some of these cable systems, right? So the
Mhm.
boat we've got's an older boat. It's got cables and pulleys that are moving those tillers. So if we get a bound up cable, if we get a pulley that's wrong, we can actually lose that steering and end up having pretty bad things happen. We see the same in airplanes. We do yearly inspections on airplanes mandatorily if the airplane's used, especially in light GA stuff for training.
Mhm.
We do 100-hour inspections. They're going through these airplanes and looking, is that cable that's going from behind the yoke up through a panel, maybe through the ceiling, down through the floor, through some pulleys to get all the way back to the tail for an elevator or up to the wing for the aileron, anywhere in there. If you got a cable break, you have, something, a pulley that's not working gets bound up. Those are things that can stop us from actually having full control of the vehicle. It's a lot more likely that those things fail than it is to have a digital signal going to a motor fail. And it's just actually a more reliable system to have the fly-by-wire, the digital systems these days. Certainly software's in there. We got to make sure the software is doing what it's supposed to. But we could even have failure modes and backup systems, right? So a lot of the modern aircraft that are building these, and especially the military stuff, they're having 2 and 3 systems in these aircraft where the first one barfs and the backup system takes over, right? So we have redundant systems and we can build that into our motor vehicles also.
You mentioned that military and aviation, you think about drones, because as the future in military gets more pilotless, everything's remote control. There is no, manual steering. I mean, that is all fly by wire. It is drones. This is what the high tech stuff uses, right? I mean,
Yep,
so
absolutely.
so when you've got a vehicle that comes out with steer by wire, and this is what baffles me. So Tesla comes out with it. Oh, it's innovative, right? And it's really cool. And it's a big selling feature, especially when we've got the rear wheel steering as well, because turning that truck is just absolutely amazing, unlike any other pickup, any other car, the turning radius. But then when you hear about these other manufacturers who've done it and then stopped doing it, it's. I think Lexus did it for a little bit, then they stopped, and now Mercedes is looking to do it, and they're going one step further to copying Tesla. They're going to put a yoke in instead of a steering wheel. So they're like, hey, they might as well go all in at that point, right?
And we've seen it on boats too. You had to feel like a three-handed octopus to try and run the boat, right? Now when you get in a cool modern boat, and it's a joystick, right? And boats with seakeepers and dock tending, and literally you just get in and move the joystick where you want. You want to be 3 inches closer to the dock, slide the joystick a little bit over. We're taking basically video game technology and go, man, that was really cool. Can we do that in my car, in my airplane? Like a lot of the airplanes that are out there, the Cirruses, they're a side stick now. The Airbuses
Hmm.
are that way. In the old days of having this big control column in the middle are going away. And we're starting to see that come back down now to consumer products into cars, right? I mean, how cool is it if you can have a side stick in the middle there and in front of you while that car is doing its thing, you could actually have some room in front of you to eat your cheeseburger, right? I mean, we're trying to make this nice and comfy and easy for us. And that's what we're doing. This is modern technology and
What's interesting is, Jason, when I had my Robalo got hit by lightning and they had to replace all the electronics, one of the upgrades I got as part of the insurance package was the Optimus steering, the joystick steering, right?
yeah.
And you were able not only to go right, left, forward, backward, diagonally, but you can actually twist it and get the boat to rotate with.
Right, an actual twist.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it's pretty cool
with twin
stuff.
motors, you could always change the power forward, reverse, the spin. It was the same thing with the Optimus joystick.
So imagine that twist on the boat, like you were able to do that. Imagine that for parallel parking in the future, right? Where you get all four wheels to independently. I mean, I could probably fit into a parking spot that I would never get my way into otherwise, right? I mean, we're going to have things that we can do with these vehicles in terms of mobility that, we just never had before. If you put these, especially if we think about, and I saw you got stuck on the beach not too long ago.
Yes, that was me.
Yeah, so imagine, you're stuck on the beach, but instead of just forward and backward in that track with the vehicle, you can twist those wheels sideways and cut out of a rut if you're in it, right?
Yep.
This is going to add mobility in these vehicles that we never had before because you're putting independent motors, independent movement on each one of the wheels that way. And that doesn't happen with a wire and cable and pulley system. That only happens with a fly-by-wire system.
I think really what it boils down to is technology, right?
Yeah.
Initially, it was people that were were anti-EV, and now they're trying to pick. Okay, well, the EV is standard now, so now there's steer-by-wire, and there's other things, and oh well, we have to pick it apart because we're afraid, right? And I really just think it's the education and an educational process, and that's why I decided to bring you on, Jason, because I just wanted you to kind of have some great words. But one of the things that you didn't mention, and I'll make sure people here do know, is that you wrote books on flying. I mean, it's
Yeah.
we have a guy here who's not only been flying his literally his whole life.
Yeah, study stuff, testing, right? So
Yeah.
I'm gonna tie this together, right? I mean, so we go back 20, 30 years ago when I was flying and started training and teaching people, and everybody looked at it and went, "Man, this GPS stuff. I don't know if we should do it and let pilots just navigate via GPS, right?" And now every check ride I do, GPS is a part of it. We still want to have those base skills, but I'm gonna tell you it has flat made us safer, right? We have better navigation systems because we've adopted that technology. And I'm going to tell you, somebody who learned, back in the 90s flying on stuff that wasn't GPS, I've had to stay up to date on that as somebody in the industry. And I think we all have to do this, in our driving as well. We're going to use new systems. And if you just throw them out the window and say we're never going to do this, boy, we'd still have folks out there on the roads in Model Ts, right? And we know that's not really what we want to do. It's a lot colder in the Model T and a little wetter because they don't stay as dry. And if nothing else, the new stuff goes a lot faster and is more safe and reliable and all of this stuff. So right, so technology is hard for us. Like we get used to something. I think just as people in general, it's hard to fight through that technology sometimes and say, man, I'm gonna switch from what I'm used to doing and get into new stuff. But we've done this in aviation with fly-by-wire, and we did it because it made us safer. We have better systems redundancy, and it made the systems work better and safer. We're gonna do this in cars. And if somebody's saying, I don't think I'm gonna do it, I mean, the train's moving, man. You can watch it go away, or you can figure out how to be on it and incorporate it into your life too.
It's funny you mentioned GPS like that because I'm sure when you started, everything was compass, and
Yeah,
when I took my captain's course for my boating, you there was a whole section. You had a chart and you had a compass map and route everything. And Jason,
yeah.
I know you're a diver. Does GPS work underwater?
It does not work underwater yet, but boy, it would be cool. Maybe we have to have a little line up to the surface, right? It's for the buoy. But that's, I mean, it's we're using it everywhere else, right? It's time to incorporate this stuff, and maybe underwater we get inertial nav systems or something eventually to help me not get lost. But in the meantime, above water, I can't remember the last time I've gone on my boat without using GPS either, right?
We're,
So,
we're, we're a
we've
slave
got
to it,
really
you
cool.
know?
Yeah. I mean, half the time I don't know where I'm at in the city when I travel anymore. Without my GPS in my phone, I'd probably be lost.
Well, with us, we just put in FSD, put in the destination, and our Cybertruck just drives us, and we just and I use it all the time. You know why? Because that thing is so freaking fast. It saves me from tickets. I just put the address in, and
It's better,
it
right?
saves me
Yeah,
from getting pulled over because my foot gets way too heavy if I put it in beast mode. So
I believe that. Yeah. That's why you fly. We don't get tickets up there.
you can get pulled over, but you don't get tickets. And
Yeah, a little harder.
yeah,
So, yep.
awesome. Well, it sounds like these Facebook gurus on steer by wire are just Tesla haters, and we figured as such.
Technology avoiders, and that's
Yep.
okay. We like classic car guys too. Yep.
Let's go back to the carburetor. But
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know it's a Saturday, but you're a great person. You're a great friend. I do appreciate it. And I do hope in December we get to see whether it's here or the Keys. Hopefully, we'll get together. I know our wives like to get together and talk, so it'll be
Absolutely, man. I will look forward to it.
well, again, thanks again. Now, guys out there and gals, you Cybertruck lovers, this is it. This is steer by wire. Nothing to be afraid of. This is the future. Okay, tell us Facebook people to. All right. So thank you for joining me today on Mark of the Cyber Beast. Remember, like, comment, subscribe, and I'm going to see you guys tomorrow.